Life is sweet. Let it sweep you off your feet.
Hi, this is Allie and Find Your Joy. And well, I've got to tell you, I am pretty excited today. We have some of Canada's musical royalty. That honestly, let me get all, I'm verklempt. BJ Cook, who has been a part of some of the most amazing bands in Canadian history, the Hawks, Skylark. I mean, the list goes on, written songs on her own and with some of the most amazing story writers on the planet. And she is from Victoria, British Columbia, and here with us today. And BJ, hi.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. I'm so excited. I mean, I feel like we were talking about this earlier. We have a mutual friend, and so
Yeah.
I kind of feel like I know some things about you, and you probably know some things about me, and we'll try to keep the secret secret. But I'm just thrilled that you're here. That's that's very nice of you to spend some time with me today.
Well, it's kind of fun for me because let's face it, if you spend 50 years or more, 60 actually, making music, and and everybody forgets about it, like what's the point, So
Oh.
this is fun for me. What else am I doing at 82? And there's not a big call for an 82-year-old rocker. I don't know why.
I don't know, Mick's doing okay. What I was kind of interested in is like where you started and some of the things that you were doing. Like what was going on for you in Victoria 80, 70, 60 years ago? Tell me
Okay,
about
so I started singing when I was about 15, and I'm so bad at math, but a long time ago. And my cousin was a drummer, and he played with the Ted Spencer Orchestra. And back then, live music was your entertainment. There
Right.
wasn't, so everybody danced, and everybody was a great dancer, and I loved to dance. So I wasn't even old enough you had to be 21 to get in the bars then.
Right.
So at 15, I was up dancing at the 1313 Club on Broad Street. And here's the weird thing I've never been able to figure out. It's always been a Navy town, and especially since the war and stuff. There was tons, and we lived in a little catchment behind up Ptolemy Avenue, right behind where Mayfair is, and up in that little area. So it was all Navy wives, and so they were very close because back then our Navy was at sea all the time. So my dad was away a lot, and my mom was in charge. And there was my brother and me. And there wasn't any music. I was a tomboy. I was just a regular kid. But about when I was 15, my cousin was playing drums in this club, and he nearly fainted when he saw me because he's quite a bit older than me, and he obviously was old enough to get the gig there. And when the break came, he came over and he grabbed me by the arm. What are you doing here? And I said, well, I came here to dance. And he had heard me sing. So he said, why don't you get up and sing with the band? And I said, oh, so stupid, right? Oh, sure, that would be fun. So I didn't know anything about what key I sang in, or, and I didn't even think about, well, I just assumed that they knew every song that you would, because they're musicians, right?
Right. Yes, that's right.
But we found a song that I could sing, and when they started playing it, everybody started dancing and everything. I thought, oh, this is cool. And then they clapped, and then I got down, and then all of a sudden I had a little celebrity, and then my cousin was saying to me, don't draw attention to yourself. And I said, well, you got me up to sing. And he said, well, you're probably going to get busted anyways. I might as well get one song out of you or something, whatever he said. I don't remember exactly, but that was the beginning. And so I used to go up on the weekends, and I learned a couple more songs. And then I had a child when I was very young, at 17. 4 weeks after I turned 17, I had a beautiful girl. And it was the scandal of Victoria. I kept her. I had a lot of friends who had babies back then, but nobody kept their babies, right?
Right, right.
And I think because I found out I was adopted when I was pregnant with her, that I was not going to give this was my human, right? That belonged
Yeah.
to me. And here's the thing, the woman who adopted me is my biological aunt. So it's her brother who is my father. And so the Wingers adopted me in Victoria, or I was living in Vancouver, and they brought me over here when I was like 8 months or a year old or something. So they had me from infancy. They didn't, I was 8 months old. And so all the cousins are all my biological cousins, and all my grandmother, it was, it was the same family, only my mother was really my aunt and my uncle was really my father, right?
Wow.
So, it wasn't complicated, and nobody said anything to me. The whole family knew. And I give that advice to anyone who has adopted a child. Bring them up with the knowledge that they were chosen. Don't
Yes.
try and hide, because finding out when you're pregnant and 16 years old, it was a nightmare, right?
Yeah.
So then the other thing I always like to share was what it was like morally. You might as well wear a great big red letter on your chest with a
Right,
big S for slut on it.
right.
And because my parents were, and I'm not kidding, and I'm not exaggerating, filthy mail would come in with pictures that were pornographic. My mother would open up these letters and they were just filled with filth and dirty pictures, and people wrote on our window that I did certain things, and it was things that I'd never heard of. And my mother poor mom would be out with the hose washing
So the
down.
mail was from people because you were a teenage mother?
Yeah, well, because this is even before she was born.
Right.
And people would collect their dog poop and put it in bags and stick it at the front door and then knock on the door, and my dad or mom would, but thank God we had a step. So they never, if it had been somebody would have walked out, but somebody would be pounding phone calls in the middle of the night, obscene phone calls. It was just horrendous. And so I felt, on top of everything else, you feel guilty. I mean, besides
Right.
all the other stuff you're going through, my
Yes.
parents were sort of being tortured for my mistake. And my poor brother was 11 at the time. He was just a kid, and they were really tough on him. And so when my daughter was a year old, I was singing in a club on Wharf Street, and somebody else told me the name of it the other day, and I can't remember. Should write all that stuff down. But you went downstairs, and it was a cool little club, and there was a band that was visiting from Vancouver, and I can't remember their name, but I remember there were a bunch of them, and they came and heard our set. And after it was over, he came up to me, this drummer named Jack Allen. And he said to me, "Girl, you can sing, you should be in Vancouver. Like, you're wasting your time here, right?"
Right.
And I'd never thought of going to Vancouver for some reason. It never, I had a kid, I had a
Yeah.
family.
You're a teenager.
Yeah, and I was a teenager. I wasn't going to go anywhere. And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, you should, get over to Vancouver." And I said, "Well, then I told him the story that I wanted to go and maybe one day find my biological mother, but I hadn't thought it was going to be like now, right?" And he said, "No." He said, "Look, you can come over with me." And he said, "My parents, they have a guest suite in the basement. I'll tell them you're a friend of mine, and you're just," and I didn't. This is the other thing too that blows my mind when I think about it, and I hear kids say, the today generation, "Well, my dad bought me this car," or my mom gave me the family allowance check when I left, was $6. That's what I left Victoria with, $6. So the fact that I own a house on Dallas Road, I always think, all right, girl, you did pretty good.
You did pretty good. Absolutely.
So, but I found my biological mother, which it was pretty easy. So anyways, after I met her, I won't get into it, but she was a character. And she introduced me to the manager of the Cave Supper Club in Vancouver, which at the time, in the 60s, because this was now 1960, right?
Right.
And Kent Stauffer was his name. And my biological mother's name was Vicky. And Vicky called him up and said, look, I got this long-legged, skinny kid here, and she wants to be in show business. So he said, well, we're looking for showgirls. Why don't you send her over? And nobody went nude back then. Nobody was walking around with their stuff all hanging out.
Right.
So I got the job because there was only two people that showed up, me. And that's where I got the name BJ, because when the choreographer, Jack Card, we were the Jack Card dancers, he introduced me, Patricia, and I was still Bonnie then. And he said, this is Bonnie, and this is Patricia. And this little girl, the smallest girl in the group, comes walking. That was just like da 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 dun dun da da. It's got Sweet Charity, right? And she walked up, da 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 da, chewing gum, cigarette, and she said, "Hey kid, what's your second name?" And I said, Jean. And she said, "Girls, meet BJ. There's only one Bonnie in this troupe, and it ain't you, kid. That's me." So that's how I got the name, because I never even thought of changing my name. And so I took my biological father's and my mother's maiden name, Cook, and I became BJ Cook. And that's as simple as that. But I get, guys have always made a comment about my name, and I guess they always will. Boys will be boys.
Boys will be boys.
Yeah. That's another argument. Hey, we're all human beings. The fact that they get a ticket because they're a male, oh, he's allowed to do that. He's a male. Well, after all, you don't expect him to do, he's a male, he's a boy.
Yeah. I think it's probably less today, but only publicly, maybe.
Well, yeah, it is. And no, men are pretty good. I've got friends that do housework and cook and do all that stuff. But in my day, are you kidding? A guy doing anything domestic? Oh, man. So I'm so happy to have lived this long to watch the change, right? I went to a gay club in this town. I met this woman. And in a place that I'm always hanging out in places I shouldn't be, because when I was a kid, I wanted to be where there was music and dancing or whatever, right? So,
yeah.
And I wasn't having sex or anything. I stayed a virgin until I was 16. I never, I wasn't out doing, and I never even thought about that. The best dancer would be the guy I'd be after, right?
Yes, that's
so
right.
he could take me on the dance floor for 4 or 5 hours. And so it was so innocent by comparison to what it did. There were no drugs involved. Nobody did dope. And getting a bottle of beer, somebody would smuggle a bottle of beer in somewhere, and that would be like, ooh, so terrible. And now, hey, the other day I went to one of the malls, and sitting right out front as you drive in the driveway was a guy with a lighter and a piece of tin foil, and he was cooking up his dope, and he was going to smoke right out in public. He didn't even bother to hide or do anything.
Right, yeah.
That part of it is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, it is. It's a whole new world, and somehow we're supposed to ignore it, I guess. I don't know.
I grew up with fear of my parents, fear of the cops, and drugs, or like getting caught doing anything. Everybody was fearful, because there were rules, and you if you broke the rules, there were consequences, right? So not now. It's very strange now to me. But I've got great grandkids, so I learn as I've got.
Yeah.
It goes on and on and on.
Yeah, our grandkids teach us a lot, don't they? There's there was things that they taught me.
yeah. So when I get into Vancouver, Vicky, I meet her, and she lets me sleep on her couch in this beautiful apartment she had in the West End, because she didn't have a guest room set up. So she let me sleep on her couch. But she said, I don't want you living here. In other words, look at, I got rid of you once. And she used to say things like that to me, like, she didn't say I got rid of you. She said, but I never thought that I would ever, 18 years later, you'd be banging on my door. And so that's another side of adoption too, that, and people,
Right.
she, in her business and in her life, she didn't have time or room for a child or a young person.
Right.
And so she rented, she paid half the rent I found a roommate, and we lived in the West End in some little dumpy apartment somewhere in the bottom half of somebody's house. And so I just kept going out to the clubs, and Vicky was very strict about what area, because the East End back then, the East End of Vancouver right now, downtown, is hideous. You
Yeah,
can't,
but it used to, yeah.
but it was cooking, when I was there, it was neon, it was like Broadway, right?
Yes.
And there were a couple of clubs that all the singers and that's how we learned our craft in those joints, right? So I got a job after the showgirl. I worked as a showgirl for about a year and a half. And then I met, I don't even remember how I met Henry Young, but I met him, and he heard me sing. Oh, I know. Maybe, I don't know. I see a lot of stuff I can't remember, but I know Henry Young was the first guy to give me a job. He said to me, will you come and sing with my band? Well, oh yeah. And he didn't like the BJ part, and he didn't want to call me. And I said, no, I kind of think it's cool, because when you put featuring BJ Cook, everyone thinks I'm a black blues singer or something, right?
Right.
So I said, no, it's always a surprise. So he finally went for that, and I started working. And then it just so happened that at that particular time in Vancouver, Joni Taylor, Joni Moore, and me were the only girls that were actually singing, three little white girls, and there wasn't, the girls hadn't discovered Vancouver and the magic, because, okay, now I will name drop. I did spend an afternoon with Sammy Davis Jr. And the only reason, seriously, the only reason he talked to me was because I was working for a PA for a really fabulous dame named J.P. Morgan. And she was the host, or one of the panel on the Gong Show.
Oh, I remember her so well. I followed her for years.
She was just the best human being. I mean, she taught me so much, and that's another lovely story. But anyways, she's the first person who approached David Foster to produce her. And if you go on YouTube, you'll see her name, and if you put J.P. Morgan and David Foster, you'll hear the album that it's just unbelievable.
Wow.
And you'll be amazed that some of the songs that Earth, Wind, and Fire made hits, she did them before Earth, Wind, and Fire, right? It's kind of cool. I connected with her a few years ago.
Oh, I loved her.
She was 93 when I talked to her, right? But she was just fabulous. She was just the coolest dame. And she was the reason that she got me out of the house. I mean, when David said he would produce her, she came over to our house we were living in North Hollywood then. And she had heard the Skylark album, and she came up to me and she said, girl, I'm dying to meet you. I love your album. You're so cool. And then as she got to see the dynamic in our house, and she said to me, aren't you singing or doing anything? I said, well, no, I got a 3-year-old, 4-year-old kid or whatever, however old Amy was.
Yeah.
And she said, well, get a sitter and come and work for me. And so I did a lot of stuff with her on the road and helped her. You know, I was a personal assistant basically, but she was very instrumental in getting me to write and getting me to realize that you know, that there was something else going on. And so
Right.
I don't even know why I brought her up. I've got so many stories. Okay, so I'm back in Vancouver. And Henry Young is my boss. I'm working for him. And I'm living in a horrible place, another dump, and not making a lot of money. We worked 7 nights a week. We did 3 shows a night. And I think I made like $75 a week, maybe not 50, maybe. And of course, the cost of living wasn't anything like it is now.
Right.
But nevertheless, so we paid our dues, put it that way. So one of the times that I was out or singing or doing something, the Calgary Shades I met the Calgary Shades, and the leader of the Calgary Shades was Tommy Chong from Cheech
Oh,
and Chong, because
yes.
he was a musician back then, right? And he came to hear me sing with Henry. And then for 10 years, Tommy gave me work because Tommy always had a club in Vancouver. He had the Elegant Parlor, Tease Cabaret, and the Shanghai Junk. And that's how Sammy Davis, that's how I got to talk about him, because he asked me how, he said, do you know Lance Harrison? Do you know Fraser McPherson? I said, well, yeah, I've done CBC radio shows with them. And just saying that to him, he came over and sat beside me on the couch and he said, I just want to tell you that Vancouver at some period in my life was a pinnacle, because I was headlining in the States and still going through the kitchen. And when I'd come up to Vancouver, I was treated like royalty and they loved me. And then I looked up on Google and he did work in Vancouver a lot. And I didn't realize that until I met him. He's a very nice guy, very humble guy. And he and JP were best friends. So I kind of left and let them hang out and do stuff, but it was amazing. It was working with her. Everyone loved her. Everyone knew her. So I got to meet some cool people, you know, through her.
And it sounds like she saw something in you and reminded you that it was there.
Yeah, she did. And that's exactly, she's kind of turned the switch back on. And people loved her. She went to John Wayne's roast. You know, the actor John Wayne, the cowboy.
Oh yeah,
she went to his roast, and I said, "Do you know John Wayne?" She said, "Oh yeah, I've known him for quite a long time, right?" So, and very humble. She, unlike me, because I tell everybody my stories, and I sound like the name dropper. But hey, those are people in my life.
well, that you know, I was going to say that when those are, you know, if I'm talking about my friends, I'm saying their names just because more people are have heard of your friends and have heard of mine. They're still the people that you hung with and you did things with, right? And JB Morgan, right? She's somebody that, I mean, I used to watch the Gong Show and her antics. Oh my gosh.
Well, you know, she got fired from.
That was what I was going to say. She's the first woman that I ever saw. I don't even remember what you call it. Like,
she just bared her breast. She never wore a bra.
yeah.
I mean, she had the fact that she could go braless and still look good.
Yes,
that was the other thing, right? So I went. They taped all the Gong shows in one day, which was a Sunday. So I was there for all the Gong shows for her, right? So I
oh my gosh.
And here's some irony. The girl that won one of the Gong shows was a girl named Cheryl Lynn, and just a really killer singer. And she ended up writing a song with David Foster and David Page from Toto.
Oh yeah,
leader of Toto, and it became and still is, a #1 disco song called Got to Be Real.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that song, To Be Real?
Yes.
And dun, dun, dun. And anyways, fabulous song. And David, when we divorced, left that song in our joint publishing company, and of course took all the, he's a businessman, and I wasn't writing them. He wrote all the songs. I didn't feel like I was entitled to half the earnings from a song that I didn't write. So I didn't take his publishing. So he decided to leave a few songs in our joint publishing company. And one of them was Got to Be Real. That song radiated. I paid cash for this house with some of the money I made from that show, right?
Wow.
From that song, I mean.
Yeah.
But what happened is the girl Cheryl Lynn has put that song in a vault, and you can't, nothing, it hasn't radiated any money. And I think there's a statute of limitations. It has to be out of, I don't know, it's a publishing thing. And
yes.
So I stopped making money from it. But at that point, I already own my house. I don't have a mortgage. I don't, so I'm very happy about that part.
Yeah. But it's interesting, like all the different way, like along the way, the different people that impact us, right? Whether someone is, I don't know, at your caliber and your level of what you're doing, there's all these people that impact us. And it's interesting that JP Morgan was, I love that a woman in the business looked at another woman in the business, when other people are sometimes clawing and scratching and being mean girls, she did the opposite.
Yeah, well, that's her nature. And also when ERA started, the big thing for ERA and all the women, Sandy, whatever her name is, I can't remember her last name, but she asked JP because she was so high profile, if she could do a lot of her meetings, and if she wanted to join this thing, and then got me involved in it. And I had some meetings, and my younger daughter, who is very political, and she just thinks that's so cool that I was involved in ERA. But to be honest, this whole thing that's happening right now with the women, and if I had have been how women, like, if I had walked up and smacked someone in the face for saying something obscene in front of me, or stood up and I wouldn't have worked ever, because I spent my life in dressing rooms with guys. And if I wanted to be part of the band, I didn't necessarily agree with what they said. And believe me, how I shut them up is that I would come up with something dirtier and meaner than they would say. They would be saying something, and then I'd say, "Oh yeah, well," blah, 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 and they would go, "Oh, okay." So I became, I didn't want to be one of the guys, but I had to be, to make music with them. You have to have that camaraderie and that closeness. So all the bands that I worked in, all the musicians I worked with, I talk about that with Henry. Henry Young's still alive, and we still talk all the time. And he and his wife they're just lovely. And he and Tommy Chong are both half Chinese, and I think they're both from Alberta. And he wanted to get back into his Chinese roots. So he married a Chinese woman, and he's very true now. He's more Chinese than he is white, right?
Right.
But he's the kindest, the most loving, not to mention talented. He was on the road with Nina Simone for 3 years,
Holy, yeah.
Yeah, wow. He's a really good guitar player. The group of musicians in Vancouver in the 60s, when I was there, by the way, my band before Skylark was called Sweet Beaver. and now I know everyone laughs and thinks that, oh,
sorry,
really?
BJ
and I was the only girl in the band, of course. But listen, awesome. How we couldn't come up with a name. I joined the band, and it was called The New Breed. And I said, if you call it the New Breeders, I might join your band, but I'm not joining a band called the New Breed. So, I mean, for a bunch of guys, that's a cool name, but not with me fronting it. And so everybody would come up. We had a mailbox in our dressing room, and somebody would write out a name they thought was cool and a thing, right? So we still couldn't find a name. And the drummer, a wonderful guy named Jim McGilvery, and his wife at the time, Brenda, used to host once a month, because back then musicians were making a living playing music. So it was, they didn't do it part-time. It was a full-time job. So we would tape with the big reels of tape the week. And then one day a week, we would go to McGilvery's and listen to what we had recorded. And then we make notes and change this and change that. So we had done that all evening. And then Johnny Carson came on, and Shelley Winters came out. And she announced that she was crying, and she had to clean it. And Johnny said, "Wow, what's going on?" And she said, "Oh, I was in the green room and they had the TV on, and little Jerry Mathers, the beaver, was just killed in Vietnam because the war was going on, right?"
Right.
And so we were like, I was crying. Everybody was, "Oh no, the beef, the beef." So Sweet Beaver is how the band got called, Sweet Beaver, because
Chicken skin. Oh. Oh.
yeah. So, and then it turned out that he didn't get killed in Vietnam. That was just a rumor.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I was sitting here thinking, I didn't even know that.
No, he did not get killed in Vietnam.
Right.
He's still alive.
Yeah, that's what okay. Well, that, I just assume I remember things wrong.
I know, isn't it weird? I mean,
yeah, but that's what it came out of. So that's
how the band got called Sweet Beaver. That's the name. And I've got on my wall right here the Victoria Rock and Roll Hall of Fame certificate that you get. And the name of the band, honest to God, I never really looked at it. And about a year ago, I guess I was dusting or wiping or something, and I took a good look at it, and it said the name of the band was the Apaches. Really? And then I have to call somebody and say, did we actually call our band the Apaches? What? And they said, yeah, that was the name of your band. And I couldn't even remember. I didn't even remember that. But what a dumb name for a band. So the Apaches, Sweet Beaver. So, I mean, Skylark, I guess when we put Skylark together, I wanted something beautiful or something, right?
yeah. Well, you know what? I mean, when I think of wildflower, I mean, probably every teenage girl that I'm for me, for sure, I'm telling you, I can still listen to that song and I'm lost. I'm back. I am, it is, I don't know what, whatever, the mid 70s, whenever that came, I don't even remember.
It was 1972 or 3.
Yeah.
We did the midnight special. And that's another thing. If you want to see the whole show of the midnight, usually they show on YouTube. If you put Skylark,
yes,
you'll see Donnie singing Wildflower and me 8 months pregnant.
Yes.
And that great big granny dress that I was wearing, this lovely granny dress. But they've now put the entire show on with Gladys Knight is hosting it. So you can go on YouTube and find that too. It's so cool because Dr. John was on that show, and who else? Dr. John, and ironically, the staple singers, and Donnie Gerard, who sang Wildflower, ended up
being a backup
Mavis Staples for 3 years. So
yeah. So
cool.
I'm going to tell you a little story that one night we're all sitting around our place, getting into mischief as one does.
Yeah.
And we've got up on our TV there to have the background music. We had purchased accidentally, actually, the whole set. It cost us like $800 or whatever it was of the midnight special.
Midnight special.
Okay. So as it's playing, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I love this song. And our friend Kate goes, "That's my pal BJ." And I'm like, "What?" And she goes, yeah. And so now we're gathered around. That's how I met you. We are now gathered around my television set.
Well, let me tell you, I was at my dentist last week, and there was a guy mulling around. He was in the waiting room with me, or when we pay at the thing, and he was sort of sitting there. And then I got when I left, he was outside, sort of mulling around the elevator, and I pushed the button, and he approached me, and he said, "Are you PJ Cook?" And yes. And he said, "Well, I just want to tell you," he said, "your version of Woodstock is the best I've ever heard." He said,
Oh,
I love your singing. I love your arrangement. Tell me you're still singing." And when that comes out of, I'm always like, what? Huh? So I didn't know what to say. I said, "Oh my God, thank you so much." And then I made a joke and I said, "Do you want my autograph?" And I was joking. I said, "Hey, do you want my autograph?" And he said, "Well, if I had the album here, I definitely would. I'd really love to have your autograph." So out of the blue, every once in a while, something like that happens. But before I forget, the band in town called the Midnights?
yes.
They've
With high
recorded.
school kids, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mentored those kids for about 15 years at Vic High because I knew that they were into R&B, which is my favorite kind of music. So Eric MD, who was the program or the man, what do you call it? Director, musical director, and I are very close friends now. And they've recorded 6 of my songs. And they sound amazing. I have to say it, like they're so good. I can't even believe it. So the beat still goes on, dear. It's hilarious, right?
Isn't that awesome?
Isn't that awesome?
It is awesome. I love that you just said that, because I don't know if I would have even told you that was my first meeting of you as we were all together here having dinner and drinks, and that was just playing in the background, and when it came on,
Would you ever recognize me if you saw me now and say, "That's me up there"? When first of all, I have naturally curly hair,
yes.
So huge hair, giant breasts, 8 months pregnant. Who would ever recognize me? That's why I'm always shocked to say, "Really? You what?"
Well, your face looks the same. Like your face is very much the same. The hair, of course, is different because the bigger hair, and now you must straighten it, I guess, and stuff like that. So there was a difference, but yeah, that's amazing. There we go, memory lane for both of us.
So yeah, isn't that cool? Well, I had a kid walk up, or a man walk up to me, and when I was singing in Toronto, and there was this club called the Blue Note when I first moved to Toronto in 1981, and even then I hadn't sung. I'd been writing with as many people as I could, but my singing days were over. And George Oliver, who had the house band at this club, the Blue Note, Gangbusters. George was like the blue-eyed soul. James Brown did the Splits and did all that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to plug this in because I'm dying here.
Oh, okay.
There, I'm in. Okay.
Yay.
So he said, "Well, you've got to sing Wildflower." I said, "I'm not, that's a sacrilege. I'm not singing Donnie's song. Are you kidding?" And I said, "First of all, it doesn't make any sense unless I'm a lesbian to sing that song, So he said, no, he said, "You could be talking about your daughter or your mother or anybody. You don't have to worry about it." So I sang Wildflower. And when I was finished, everybody was cheering. "Oh, that's so cool." And I knew that I thought if Donnie or David Foster could ever see me doing this right now, they'd freak, I'm sure. So at the end, I get off the stage, and the very first guy that's standing there, he takes my hand and he pulls me close and he says, "I got my first boner dancing to that song in high school." I said, "Oh, well, thank you for sharing."
What do you say to that?
Well, what can you say? I mean, and people that have that kind of, I mean, people think that stuff, but they never say it out loud. But this guy just had to tell me that. That was something he had to share with me for sure. And I was like,
"Oh,
thank you for sharing." Yuck.
Oh God. I think I don't think before I speak sometimes. It's like,
Well, yeah. Well, if he did it in a way that wasn't gross. He wasn't
right.
being,
He was, yeah, I get it.
he
I
thought
get
he
it.
was paying me a compliment.
Yeah,
By
I get
telling
it.
me that.
And yeah, I could say something like that. I could see it. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, so many I worked for 10 years in the bars in Vancouver. I arrived when I was 18, and David came into my life when I was 28. And this to bring David Foster into it, and you can't very well not bring him into it.
Well, no, he's a big part of your life.
Yeah. So I'm like a big singer in Vancouver at that point, a bar singer anyways. And I'd never heard of Ronnie Hawkins. I'd never even heard of the guy because it wasn't my genre of music, number one.
Right.
And he's from Fayetteville, Arkansas. And he's a rockabilly rocker guy. So David was playing in Edmonton with the Tommy Banks Orchestra, and they were at the Embers, this big nightclub. And he was a kid. He was still, I think he was 19 or 20. He was 20. And Ronnie came into town because Ronnie always put it, as everyone knows, a monster band. The first band, of course, became the band.
The band, yes.
And then the second band he put together, Janis Joplin, John Till, that Full Tilt Boogie Band, became her band. That was Ronnie's band that they took.
Oh, wow.
So now he was looking, and he always had killer musicians and really good players, but he wanted to put another killer band together. And he went to Edmonton because of a band that somebody had turned him on to called The Privilege. And the guy name was Andy Krawchuk, the lead singer. And so Ronnie and Andy talked, I guess, and Ronnie flew out. And as somebody that would even suggest, they were like Earth, Wind, and Fire and Blood, Sweat, and Tears. They had horns, they had everything.
Wow.
Nothing like Ronnie Hawkins, right? And every time I tell this story, I have to write it down somewhere because I keep forgetting to ask David, how the hell did you're this jazz 20-year-old dedicated. Bill Evans is his hero. He's a jazz guy, and it's only his record collection is just jazz piano players. Nothing, no Motown, nothing. Just not white, but jazz, serious jazz.
Yes.
Musicians, and when I think about Ron, if you knew Ronnie Hawkins and you knew David Foster, those two people are so. It's like what do you call what's the word? The
diametrically opposed.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly that. And so David. He said to David, okay, David got all these killer musicians in Edmonton. He quit Ronnie Banks and he put a band together, and they were going to be Ronnie's road band and killer musicians. Hugh Brocky and Steve Pugsley from Victoria, David's favorite bass player, and all these great players. And Dwayne Ford, he had a band called Atkinson, Danko, and Ford, and they had a Barefootin' was a big hit. And so all these really good musicians. And then Ronnie says, son, we need a girl. We need a girl singer in this band. We need something, believe me. And because, David's not a rock and roll guy. He's a jazz guy, right? So at that time, now he's definitely the king of the pop, but at the time he was dedicated to jazz. And so David says, I don't know any girl singers. And he said, the only girl singer I know, we're both from the same town. She's been in Vancouver for 10 years and she's got a great job. I was with Sweet Beaver. We had a house gig.
Yeah.
He said, she's not going to leave her band and her job. And Ronnie said, well, you're going to go and find her, man, or go and find somebody. So here's the spiritual part in my life. I truly believe that that I'm guided by something. You know, people, everybody has their form of religion. Well, I've had a voice or a conscience or whatever of somebody egging me on or telling me what I should do. And I wake up one morning and like at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I see a face in front of me like this. And the voice says to me, you have to bring your band and come to Toronto. So I've been with the band now a couple of years, and this has never happened. I thought, how weird. So the next morning, which you never call a musician in the morning, I call Al Mickey, who was the leader of the band, and I said, hey, I got this message from someone that we should take the band and go. And he said, first of all, what are you calling me at this time in the morning? And second of all, who the hell are you talking? What are you talking about? And I said, well, this guy told me his name. His name is Ronnie Hawkins, and we should go. And he said, never heard of him. I said, well, I haven't either, but I said, he's talking to me. So this went on for a couple of months. And then finally, Al Mickey came to work one night and held a meeting. And he said, I'm going to fire BJ. And he said, BJ's driving me nuts. We're not going to Toronto, BJ, but obviously you should go to Toronto. So I'm on 1 month's notice. I'm breaking a new singer in, Carl. The other guy, Donnie, I stood between two guys in the singers. And Carl was one guy, Donnie was the other. So I broke Carl in to be the singer. He was learning all the material and all that stuff. And I'm on stage and I see David walk in, and I know him from Victoria, and I know he's a big, everybody, you know, David Foster, killer musician, you know. So he comes in, he sits at the band table. So on the break, we don't usually, back then, we didn't mingle. You were the head, you know, you had a dressing room. We had dressing rooms and everything back then, right? So, but I went out and I sat with him, and I said, what are you doing here, slumming and making a joke? And he said, no, he said, I actually need your help. He said, I put this band together with this guy, Ronnie Hawkins, and we're looking for a girl singer. And at that point, time sort of froze. And I went, wait a minute, I'm leaving this band because Ronnie Hawkins has been. And then I found out that Ronnie and I are polar opposites. He's January 10, I'm July 10. Tropic of Cancer, Capricorn. And so we're very tuned in. And David is 7 years younger than me, and I'm 7 years younger than Ronnie. So we're all in the passages thing. So it was all aligned, the stars, whatever. So I went and auditioned. I did one show. My last show with Sweet Beaver was at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre. Me and the Collectors was on 1 hour and me on the other. And that was my last show. And then I went to Calgary or Alberta, Edmonton, to see if I was going to be with this band. And David had kind of lied to me and said he had a 2-bedroom apartment, and he said, you can have one of the rooms. And I thought he was a magical piano player, but I thought he was just a skinny little, you know, nerd. I never really thought anything about him. So it turns out that he had a roommate who had that room. And now I don't have a room except there's a big bed in his room. And I said, well, I'm going to stay here until I can make other arrangements. And it turned out that for the 6 weeks that we were there, I stayed. And that's how we got started. Then we got in Ronnie's bus, and David drove Ron. We took off in the tour bus and drove to Ontario. And we were Hawks for about a year and a half, 2 years, about a year and a half. And then when David actually got fired. And it's funny, actually. It wasn't funny at the time, but
No, but
Ronnie called us into the office, or into his office, the gym. Ronnie managed boxers
oh
and
wow.
a boxing ring and everything. So we're in this gym, and he said, son, he said, son, because he's from Fayetteville, Arkansas, and he says, son, you play like Beethoven, but you look like a cadaver on stage. This is a rock and roll band, son. And he said, you're fired. You're fired. And so David was like laughing, thinking he's joking. And then he made a little speech to me and said, you can come with me and, you'll be singing. And so I said, no, I'm in love. I'm going to go with my little skinny boyfriend. And David was so thin back then. Oh my God. I got pictures you wouldn't even believe. He weighed like 138 pounds or something, right? He was very thin. And all of my friends were like, what? Like, what are you doing? But I just felt, the way it came in, Ronnie Hawkins and Ronnie talking to me, and I just felt like that's where I should be. So we lasted for 10 years. We were together for a while. It wasn't that we didn't last.
Yeah.
But, David and I are still friends. And of course, we have our beautiful daughter, Amy, who wrote all Michael Bublé's hits. Amy wrote, I Just Haven't Met You Yet, and Home, and everything.
Wow.
So, and now I saw her son on Sunday. I haven't seen him for 4 years. They live part-time in Iceland.
Wow.
And she started a whole new company and business. She's a knitter and an amazing knitter. So now she goes right to the source, gets the wool, dyes it herself, and she's getting her own line of wool and creating her own. And they bought this really beautiful little apartment, which is like 4 hours out of what is it?
Reykjavik? Is it Reykjavik?
Yeah.
Is that how you say that?
Yeah. And
wow.
it's a very remote village with all these incredible knitters, and she's in her glory. She graduated from the American University in Washington, D.C. with a degree in international business, and she got a deal for the spoken word when she moved to England as soon as she graduated. And she got a deal and had a book out of the spoken word. It's beautiful. I must have a copy of it somewhere in my, it's a treasure. So I probably got it put away in my treasure.
Yeah.
But she's a great lyricist, and she's an author. She's got 3 books out. She's, and she's really amazing. So sadly, I don't get to see her that much or spend time with her because I hate traveling, and I'm sure the hell not going to Iceland. That's for sure.
It's amazing. Oh my gosh. And so now, your grandson lives in Iceland as well.
Okay, so my grandson they live in Portland. They live in Portland and Iceland. Right.
Oh,
I love Portland too. So when she has 3 kids, and I was there for her and helped her raise all 3 of her kids. And at some point, I was there, and then she just got really, really busy and started traveling, and the kids got older, and I didn't need to be there. They didn't need my help. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just
life goes that way, right?
Exactly. And so my oldest granddaughter is 25, Amy's oldest girl, and the youngest daughter is 21, and Vaughn is going to be 14 in August, and he's 6 feet tall. He's a giant, and he's just a beautiful, lovely boy. So I'm very blessed. I've got my oldest grandson is 42, and he has 2 children, a daughter named London and a little boy named Atticus.
Oh, I have a nephew called Atticus.
Oh, do you?
I do.
Oh, I think it's
a great nephew. He's my great nephew, Atticus. Yes.
Well, is it from To Kill a Mockingbird?
Yes,
Well-
their kids are all, Phaedra and
Oh, yeah.
and there's like they're avid readers and their names are that's amazing. I'm gonna have to do something right now. I'm going to
Okay.
have to I sadly, although we started this earlier and I'm realizing now my alarm just went off that I have an appointment at 10:45, a medical
Okay, well,
appointment.
listen, I'm here all day anyways.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stop this. They'll edit this for me. I'm gonna stop this one, and if you're open,
I'm having a blast, no
oh
problem.
my gosh,
Well,
this
you
is
know
like,
what? I craft all day. I don't know if Kate, let me just show you my latest
I
craft.
want to see it. I have seen some of your amazing bejeweled stuff that Kate
Well,
has, and I'm like,
I mostly do.
holy crap!
I mostly do masks, right? So, this is
Holy shit!
yeah, they're quite.
Patience.
This is a man mask, though. This is big, right?
Yeah.
They're all from a tribe. And my one friend, I have 7 girls. We all hung out, and then we're just called the tribe. I said, well, why don't we give ourselves? No, we're the tribe. And one of the girls is terrified of masks. They scare the hell out of her.
Yeah.
So she said, why can't you do butterflies? So I was in Dollarama and I found this tin butterfly and I made her, and I did this. So it's quite fabulous, actually. And
it's amazing.
well, you got to do something, if you're
Okay, so I'm gonna sign this out and then I'll chat with you in just a second. So I'm just gonna,
Okay.
well, we're at the end of our time for right now, sadly, but I am very excited to say that we're going to meet together again, and that's going to be fabulous. BJ Cook, you are a gift to the planet. I'm just thrilled that we got to spend this time together. You're more. I was excited and thought I was going to be swept away and amazed by the stories that you tell, and I have to tell you that you outdid what I thought was going to be.
Oh, that's very kind. So I'll just sign off then. It was great talking to you.
So thank you for your time, and to our listeners, thanks so much for coming and hanging out with us for a bit today, and remember to find your joy. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you found a piece of your joy in this episode, I would love to hear about what came up for you so that we can continue to grow the impact of this show. Thanks again. See you soon. And remember, find your joy.